Okay, so let's move on to another example, and this is how we might frame free trade. Now, you may already know that free trade refers to the buying and selling of goods between countries without tariffs or subsidies, right? So America sells aircraft to China, China sells a whole bunch of low-priced consumer goods to America. And that trade would be free if neither country is putting any kind of import tariffs, or they're not subsidizing the industry in any kind of way, right? Now, the American justifications for free trade come in two different flavors. One is sort of an economic argument. Free trade is most efficient, and it benefits both countries. And this is typical of voluntary exchanges. Remember, we said that in the free market system, if two individuals voluntarily agree to some exchange, then they are calculating that it's in their interest. So it should make both parties better off if they agree to do the exchange in the first place. But the second one's a moral argument, right? Free trade is fair. Since the American economy is relatively open to foreign goods, then it's only fair that the foreign economies should be open to American goods, right? So that's a kind of a fairness argument. And here we can take a look at that fairness argument in a little more detail, and that's where the framing issue is going to come up. So the moral argument, a level playing field, no tariffs, is fair for the participants. But if we think about that, there's an assumption built into that claim, right? And the assumption is that the players are equal. Because after all, what if the players are unequal? Is a level playing field still fair? And therein lies the framing issue. So fairness ends up depending on what we're focusing on. Are we going to focus on the field, whether it's level or not? Or are we going to focus on the players? Are they equal or not? Or some combination of both? Let's take a look at a cartoon of the situation. Here we can use a sports analogy. Let's imagine here's a playing field, and here are two competitors, right? Well, they look sort of evenly matched here, so this we might say is a fair match. But down here we've got a problem, right? Here's a 5-year-old and here's an adult, and they're going to go at it. Well, that doesn't seem fair. So while the playing field is level, right, the competition we might judge to be unfair in this circumstance because the players are unequal. Now, what do you do in this situation? How do you make a competition fair? Well, you might maybe put blindfold on this one, or, tie their leg up or something, or make them wear a 100-pound, sack on their back. Or you could conceptually tilt the playing field, right? So the concept of the tilted playing field is to address the inequality of the players, to make the whole situation more fair. Now, it turns out that in American history, we have an example, and I'd like you to think about this history, and then I'm going to ask your opinion about whether you think some decisions made in the past were the right decisions. So with respect to trade, we're going to take you all the way back to the time of Alexander Hamilton. He was Treasury Secretary in 1789, and he went and he was looking around at the economic situation of America, and he noticed some important facts. That the British, of course, they'd already had their sort of industrial revolution. They had a head start in that, and they were importing advanced manufactured goods to America. The American manufacturing could not compete with the British imports, right? The British imports were cheaper and they were better made, right? Now, Hamilton argued that in that circumstance, American manufacturing needed protection from the British imports. Right. And he went to Congress and he advocated an industrial plan that would shield these so-called infant industries, the infant manufacturing companies. Now, how do you shield them? Well, you impose import tariffs, for example, on the British goods. So you make the British goods more expensive, and that creates an economic environment where the American manufacturers are better able to compete. Of course, he also advocated other types of things that would build up the American manufacturing system, a banking system, the patent system, infrastructure, education, and so on. So he wanted America to become an industrial powerhouse like Britain was becoming, or was at the time. Now, at the time, Adam Smith had different ideas about what America should do. Smith argued that America should not develop manufacturing. It would be bad for America. right? Americans would be denied better and cheaper British imports. See, if you put tariffs on the British imports, then you're just making those good products expensive for everybody. That's bad for the Americans, right? And the American manufacturers that existed at the time, they did not make high quality stuff, and it was expensive. So Smith is going to say that America should not put tariffs on British imports or develop manufacturing, shield manufacturing, so that it could develop. In Smith's view, really what countries should always do is to pursue their comparative advantage. And manufacturing was not one of America's advantages. Rather, America had some raw materials, so what America should be doing is exporting raw materials and then importing the manufactured goods. That would be the recommendation of Adam Smith. Hamilton says thanks, but no thanks. Now, Hamilton didn't just disagree with Adam Smith, across the ocean there. He also disagreed with Jefferson. Jefferson, he was advocating a sort of an agrarian society where there'd be a whole bunch of sort of landowners and farmers and so on. Jefferson agreed with Smith on this point about industrialization. Why buy expensive and bad American manufactured goods? Let me do this right now. There we go. I buy. Now, Hamilton's ideas were mostly rejected at the time, although Congress did raise tariffs a little. And this is data from, Ha-Joon Chang's book. I'll introduce him in a moment. Hamilton ended up being shot in a duel, but by 1816, Congress did enact some tariffs, and protectionism began in earnest. And by the 30s, Chang argues that America is one of the most protectionist economies in the world. So it raises a question to think about. If you were living at the time, or even just in retrospect, would you have supported Hamilton's protectionist policies? Right? Because we kind of know what the outcome was now. America really did become a manufacturing powerhouse, right? And this is what led to our wealth. But at the time, to implement these protectionist policies, you would have had to have been going against the concept of free trade, something that the influential Adam Smith was arguing for. Now, Ha-Joon Chang, in his book Bad Samaritans, makes some points. He argues that this idea of the level playing field, the free trade, is the wrong principle when the players are unequal, right? We don't see tilted playing fields in life. We have level playing fields in sports because we restrict which teams are allowed to play with each other. Professional sports teams do not play high school teams, for example. If they did, maybe we would have tilted fields. Chang argues that this idea of free trade can be a self-serving policy, right? According to Chang, many wealthy countries today used protectionist policies in the past. Britain, Japan, America, Germany, South Korea, on and on. There are only a couple of countries, he notes, in Europe that did not follow this pattern, that were sort of free from the get-go. But today we hear this idea of free trade being not only economically beneficial for both parties, but fair, right? And Chang is arguing that's a self-serving policy, that promoting free market policies is self-serving for the more powerful country. It's actually harmful to the poor country. And so from Chang's point of view, Alexander Hamilton did precisely the right thing. He violated free trade principles in order to protect American manufacturing. That allowed the American companies to grow and ultimately be able to compete with foreign manufacturing goods. And so it would be an interesting question to look in our own history books. How are protectionist measures framed in history? How is free trade framed? So is early protectionism of the sort that Hamilton advocated, was that protectionism of the manufacturing sector framed as beneficial, right, for America? Or is it framed as maybe an unfortunate, short-sighted policy that harmed America, as Adam Smith would have said?